What if the reason nothing is moving isn't that you're not trying hard enough, but that you've been fighting yourself every step of the way? In the 1970s, researchers studying peak athletic performance discovered something that contradicted everything coaches believed at the time. The athletes who performed best under pressure were not the ones who tried hardest. They were the ones who had learned to get out of their own way, not to care less, not to want it less, not to treat the outcome as unimportant, to stop creating internal resistance to their own movement. And what these athletes described in different words, from different sports and different countries, was the same experience. A quality of effort that didn't feel like effort, movement that didn't feel like fighting. The particular ease of someone who had stopped working against themselves. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying this state, what he called flow, the conditions under which human performance reaches its natural peak. And what he found, across thousands of interviews with artists, athletes, surgeons, musicians, was consistent and surprising. Flow doesn't arrive through more effort. It arrives when effort stops being a struggle against the self. When the doing and the doer stop fighting each other. I spent a long time thinking that ease was something other people got to have, that straining was the price of caring, that if it didn't cost me something, it didn't count. Stay with me, because what I found when I finally examined that belief changed something real. I want to ask you something honest. When did effort become the measure of how much you care? Not as a philosophy, as a lived experience in your body. When did you first learn that the amount you strain is proof of the amount you love, want, value? That exhaustion is the currency of worthiness? Because that equation didn't arrive as an idea. It arrived as a lesson. Maybe you watched someone you loved work themselves into depletion and call it dedication. And somewhere in you decided, this is what real caring looks like. Maybe you were rewarded for pushing through and overlooked when things came easily. And you learned, ease means you're not trying hard enough. Maybe rest was something you had to earn in your house, and the bar kept moving. And you internalized, I am not yet done earning it. Or maybe it was simpler than any of that. Maybe you just noticed, very early, that the people who struggled visibly got seen, and the ones who moved with ease were assumed to not need anything. So you learned to struggle visibly, even when you didn't have to. Even when the straining was costing you more than the thing was worth, and the trying became identity. I am someone who works hard. I am someone who doesn't give up. I am someone who pushes through. These sound like strength, and they can be. But here's the question I had to sit with for a long time before I could answer honestly. What if some of what I call strength is actually a fear I've never examined? The fear that if I stop straining, if things come with ease, if the movement is less painful, something essential will be confirmed. That I am only as valuable as my effort. That ease means I don't care enough. That if it doesn't cost me something, I don't deserve it. Stay with me here. Neuroscientist Mark Jung Beeman at Northwestern spent years studying the brain in the moments just before genuine insight arrives. What he found was not what anyone expected. The moments of real breakthrough, the creative solution. The answer that actually works. The shift that holds are preceded by a very specific brain state. Not effort, not concentration. Not the straining focus we associate with working hard. Alpha waves. A signature of relaxed attention. The answer arrives in the exhale, not the strain. Which means the moments you are pushing hardest are often the moments you are furthest from the clarity you need. And the moments that feel almost like giving up the walk, the shower, the unexpected stillness, those are precisely the conditions under which the thing you've been forcing finally arrives. Not because you stopped caring, because you stopped creating so much internal noise that the signal couldn't get through. I've watched this in myself enough times now to stop being surprised by it. The conversation that shifted, something didn't happen when I was managing it carefully. It happened when I stopped performing and said what was actually true. The work that broke through didn't come from the late nights of effortful concentration. It came from the afternoon I finally gave up and went outside, and the answer arrived before I reached the end of the street. The decision that finally felt right didn't come from analyzing it harder. It came from the moment I stopped needing it to be a certain answer and let myself see what was actually there. In every case, the ease was not the absence of caring. It was the arrival of alignment. The difference between moving towards something and fighting my way to it. And those two things look similar from the outside. They feel entirely different from the inside. Your body knows the difference. Even when your mind has decided that straining is the only legitimate way to move. Here is what I want you to consider about the life you've been building. How much of what you've created came from the moments of greatest effort? And how much came from the moments when you were simply present, not trying to get somewhere, not managing something, not pushing through, just here, in this, available to what was actually happening? Because I think, if you're honest, the answer might surprise you. The relationship that feels most real wasn't built in the moments you were working hardest at connection. It was built in the ordinary moments when you forgot to perform. The work you're most proud of didn't come from the nights of grinding effort. It came from the hours when something clicked and the time disappeared and you looked up and couldn't believe how much had moved. The clarity you needed most didn't arrive when you were chasing it. It arrived when you finally stopped running long enough for it to catch you. This is not an argument against work. It is an argument against a specific kind of work, the kind that is fighting itself, that is generating resistance faster than progress, that is consuming more in internal friction than it is producing in forward movement. There is a version of effort that is fluid, that moves with the shape of things rather than against them. That doesn't require you to override your own nature to get where you're going. And that version of effort is not laziness. It is not indifference. It is what becomes available when you stop spending half your energy fighting yourself. The question is not whether you're working hard enough. The question is whether the effort is aligned or whether you are, as you have perhaps been doing for a very long time, pushing in a direction that some part of you is simultaneously resisting. And that question has an answer. You can feel it if you go quiet enough. The difference between moving and fighting, between trying and flowing, between the effort that builds and the effort that merely exhausts. I'm not going to tell you to stop trying. The trying brought you here. It built real things. Before it gets examined, it deserves to be acknowledged. What I want to leave you with is one question. Not a task, not a practice, just this. The next time you notice you're straining, not engaged, not focused, but straining before you decide the answer is to push harder. Ask yourself where the resistance is coming from. Not in the situation. In you. Because sometimes the obstacle is external and requires more force. And sometimes the obstacle is the force itself. And learning to tell the difference, really learning it in the body, not just as a concept, is one of the quieter and more significant things a woman can do for herself. The ease you've been looking for was never something ahead of you. It was never something to earn, or find, or finally deserve. It was something you kept stepping away from, because somewhere along the way, you learned that ease meant you weren't trying hard enough. You were wrong about that. And knowing that, really knowing it, is the beginning of moving differently. If this reached you in some way, stay close. Subscribe. We're in this together.